Hey everybody, welcome back. As you can tell from what's on the workbench, I'm going to do an Iron Man build. Not really Iron Man, but a War Machine build. And it's the Punisher version of the War Machine. It's the version where Punisher snuck into a military base, stole the War Machine armor, and put skulls on it, essentially. And so I'm starting with the helmet. I think the helmet is a great piece to start with, get the motivation going, because building a whole suit is a lot of work. I haven't ever completed an entire suit. I've been a part of printing an entire suit, but I have never made one for me to wear, and so I thought it's about time. So this series, it's going to be a series. I guess that's the first thing to say, is it's not going to be a one and done video. These are going to be a little more long form, blog type, educational, really step-by-step stuff here. So what we're going to start with is the base of the helmet. We're going to talk about scaling. So you could see I have two masks here. This file is from Do3D. It's not a free one, but go over there, check it out. And I thought I'd print it at 100%, just the normal default 100% settings, and let's see what happens, right? So I printed the mask and it looked pretty good. See, not horrible. Pretty tight to my jaw. And so I just wanted to see, speaking of the jaw, that was next. And so in printing the jaw, I noticed this is way too tight. And so the walls were too thin, it was too tight, and so it was too small. So I opted for 104%. And the measurements on 104% give me enough room for things like wires and my head to fit in. And it's still fairly tight in some places, but that's good. You don't want to look like a bobblehead. And so this is 104%. Your results may vary. You want to make sure that you measure your head and body parts. Don't assume that a file is just going to fit you right off the printer. You have to kind of put some time into figuring out measurements on this stuff. And I said that the walls were too thin on this. I think this was like 2.5, too thin for my liking. So I made the helmet 4 millimeters thick. I know that seems like overkill, and in some cases it is. I do not remember the infill on this. Lately I've been just doing 10% infill with a line width on the support, or not the support, the infill, the line multiplier on the infill being 2 instead of 1 at 10%, and I use gyroid settings. This is all within Cura, the Cura slicer, so you can find all of those settings there. All right, so what am I doing here? So this is PLA. I printed PLA. I use Hatchbox as well as Overture PLA. I've had good luck with them. They're not a sponsor, but really good luck with their PLAs. And you can see I've done a multiple phases of starting to finish this helmet. So this is right off the printer here. So it's just regular PLA. You can still see the striation lines. You can still see where the support is on the back. And I'm actually going to use some Bondo on that. I don't use Bondo very often. It's super smelly. It's a pain. Like when you're sanding it, you have to be very careful. But it definitely has its uses. This is one of them. This is very wavy back here where it was on the bed. It needs to be round, and so I'm going to use Bondo for that. So you just need a little Bondo. I got this from Walmart. You can get it from any auto body shop, hardware store. You can find little things of Bondo, but be careful. Wear a respirator when you use this stuff. It's not good for your lungs. All right, so I'm going to fill that in after I sand this down, and then smooth it with that Bondo. And then the pink that you're seeing is actually Bondo glazing putty. I think I have a little of that here. Yeah, a lot of my tubes look like this because I use this stuff all the time. You get it, squirt it out, put it on the helmet, smooth it out, wait 20 minutes sometimes, and sand it. But I saw a video recently by Ben Eady, and he actually recommended to dilute the glazing putty with acetone. And so with acetone, I was able to brush on, and it dries in 3 minutes or something like that. And then you can sand it, put another application on, sand it. Then you can see where the really deep parts are that need the actual thick glazing putty. And so you waste less, it goes on quicker, it's really been a game changer for just the beginning of this project. So Ben, if you see this, thanks again. That's a great video. All right, so the other parts of this are the mask and the jaw. And I wanted to, at first I wanted to put some linear actuators in the jaw, and that's not going to happen on this version. So I still needed a way to connect the jaw. I have opted for magnets, and so you can see, and I'll try to put a close-up here, but you have these little neodymium rectilinear magnets. Make sure you get the polarity right. I did not. I tried to be careful. It's just sometimes these things are tricky. And I wanted a good way to mount these. I didn't want to just use epoxy because it has to be precise. So I used these neodymium magnets and epoxy sculpt. This kind of project really celebrates the versatility of epoxy sculpt. You can get this stuff on Amazon. It's not too expensive. It's a two-part, 1-to-1 mixture. Make sure to mix it up so there's no marbling. And then it turns rock hard. And so it's mildly sculptable. I wouldn't do anything too artsy with it in terms of like trying to sculpt a person or something like that out of it. But it has really good applications for like fitting magnets in here. And I'll show a close-up here, but I knew that the magnets had to line up here like that, and it holds them in place beautifully. And then I just epoxied the magnets to the jaw. But the epoxy sculpt gives the magnets in the dome a home to live in. And that's not moving. It's a rock hard adhesive surface. It's stuck. So get yourself some of this. It works really well. I have some other things on this build where I'm going to use this stuff. So stay tuned for that. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and get to sanding this, and we'll probably be back once I'm done priming it. So the first thing I did was get a sanding disc, a 40 grit for my Bauer hand sander, my power sander here, and started getting rid of that really rough support material. Do not try to put Bondo in support material. It will not work. So go gently, wait for it to come off. Don't try to rush the process. Mix your Bondo thoroughly and apply it. You only need a bead of the catalyst to make it hard. Once it's hard, you can go back with a paint scraper or a putty knife like I'm doing here and just gently put your detail back in. It's not going to go away. You just gently put it back in, and then you can sand it again. I like going with a higher grit this time. 220 seems to be what I like. You may find something else. I go over it, just again, don't let it rest in one area or you're going to melt your helmet. So just make it nice and smooth. Then I am going to prime the pieces. So I'm priming the mask here, but after I'm done priming, and some sanding, I add some filler in the really deep spots. I find that wood filler actually works really well for this. And after wood filler, you're good to go. You can prime it again if you want, but I was ready for wet sanding. I thought I'd start with 400. And so I started with that 400 wet sand. I have like a bucket of water next to me, and that's what I use to wet sand this. It's okay to get your parts wet too if you want to dunk your part in there, depending on what it is and if it's hollow or not. But just give it a once over. Do this, rinse and repeat, no pun intended, over and over again until you're happy with the surface, and then you can put your final coat of primer on it and get to painting if you want. All right, and we're back. So it's been a couple days since I started the helmet. I only get to work on it after the 9 to 5 and weekends, and so it takes a while. Sue me. So I have covered this in a flat black automotive primer, and what this does is it shows me exactly how much work I have to do still. So there's still some layer lines. There's some work in the eyes that I still have to do. That would be really boring to watch, but I wanted to talk about it. Get yourself a set of needle files, some diamond needle files. You can get them on Amazon, Harbor Freight, things like that. They're great tools for getting into small places like the eye. That's a real celebration of their use here. Get some of those. I still have to do that. But I'm not too worried about the striations throughout the helmet because I'm actually going to battle damage this whole suit. It is the Punisher suit after all, so stay tuned for that. That'll be much later when I get the whole suit done. We'll battle damage it. And I want to talk about the mask. The mask was a big pain. As you can probably see even from there, I'll try to get a close-up of this, is it split apart a couple times and I had to take a soldering iron and drag it across the surface slowly, slow enough to where it would melt and fuse the seam together, but it also created a channel in which I could lay 5-minute epoxy, and then I went over the channel as well, as you can see, and that seemed to firm it up pretty nicely. This right here, this is just some of that epoxy sculpt. I was trying to problem solve with some of that, and I went with epoxy and instead all over the mask. So that is basically it for the helmet. And so stay tuned. If you want to see the rest of the build, make sure to click subscribe. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I'm happy to answer questions, and I love learning from you all. And then consider liking as well. So we'll see you next time.